All right, I will call the meeting to order at 10 o'clock, January 27th. And welcome everybody. We do have a new public member, Cole Robinson. Kept doing Robinson, it was a habit, but Cole Robinson, I just want to say welcome to you. And we'll go ahead and take roll call, if you could, please.
Sure, I can do that. Lee,
Here.
Mike Morgan,
Here.
Randy,
Here.
Tressa, Stephanie,
Here.
Mike Marlowe, Ed.
Was that it?
Sorry, did Mike say present? Mike Marlowe?
Present.
Yeah, we'll get you a spot.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, and then I didn't hear if Ed said present also.
Here.
Okay, Rondalyn,
Here.
Cole,
Here.
and then we have Chair Kesner and Commissioner Lerner online.
All right, thank you. Discussion possible action to excuse any committee members' absence. Do we know of any particular reason? I think we just have, what, 1, 2 are missing?
You actually gotta keep that.
Keep that open,
Yeah.
even though there's construction, you could kind of just have it like just barely.
No? Okay.
How are you? You have the overview. Yeah. Don't worry.
All right, housekeeping, Ms. Abby.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone. The first thing I will bring up is that I am not Vanessa. We had a change of duties, and so I am now General Counsel. Vanessa is Deputy Executive Director, and so I will be taking over her duties, particularly in this meeting, which starts with housekeeping. So I will try to do her justice here. So I know you're all very familiar with this process by now, but for those of you online, if you can just keep yourselves muted. And we do ask that if you're a committee member online, I don't think we have any today, but to keep your cameras on, or your commission liaison. Other than that, you can keep your cameras off and yourselves muted unless you want to speak, and you can jump in, you can raise your hand. Either way is fine. The only other thing I'll mention here is, as you know, this camera, or this microphone, I'm sorry, is sensitive, so it will pick up side conversations. It's just something to be aware of for those of you in the room. Well, I've got.
Okay. Congratulations on the new positions. By the way.
Thank you.
Good. All right, number 5, election of officers. So we have 3 positions to elect for the 2025 year, chair, vice chair, and secretary. And so we start with each position individually and take nominations for each position. If there's multiple nominations for those positions, then we'll do a vote. If not, then those people will be elected to those. So with that being said, we'll start with election of officers for the chair. Do I hear any nominations for chair for 2025?
Lee, you're doing a great job. I nominate you.
I second.
Any other nominations? Okay. I will continue as chair. Any nominations for vice chair?
Bueller.
How about Mike Morgan?
I was gonna throw my name.
What about Mike Morgan?
but See if anybody else.
Any other nominations for vice chair? All right, then Mike Morgan will be vice chair. Secretary?
Stephanie.
That was right there. Absolutely.
Okay, fair is fair.
See how that works? All right, any other nominations for secretary?
Y'all got lucky.
All right, that will be our slate of officers.
So do I need to take notes this meeting or starting now?
No, the notes are done via video.
Okay.
That's how those are done. But if you'll just kind of keep track of those, staff will usually let us know when those minutes are available and let us know if you can kind of take over looking at those, make sure there's any corrections or anything needs to be made, stuff like
We
that.
send them to you before we post.
Yeah.
So
That'll
you
be
approve them.
That'll be Amber. That's it.
Perfect.
Okay. So with that, appointments to the two subcommittees, we have Education Subcommittee, Standards of Practice Subcommittee. Last year, Mr. Morgan was the chair of that, and we had Mr. Marlowe, Teresa Benavides, and Stephanie. And then Standards of Practice, Brian Carroll was the chair, who is no longer on the committee, Randy, Rhonda Lynn, and Ed. I know that each committee has been going on their own things. I don't want to, for the most part, we have the same people. I'd like to see us ideally keep the same people in place, just because I don't want to stop any momentum that's gone there. So if everybody's okay with that, let's say on the Education Subcommittee, are you willing to be the chair for that? Okay. Teresa's not here, but Mike and Stephanie, you guys willing to stay on the Education Subcommittee? Good. Okay. And then we'll leave Teresa on there as well. So for Standards of Practice, Brian's no longer here. Randy, would you be willing to take over as chair for that? Okay, so Randy will take over that. Rhonda and Ed, you guys okay staying on there? Okay. And guess which committee you get to start on? So there you go. Mr. Cole, sorry, I had to remember the first name. So Cole Robinson, you'll be on the Standards of Practice Subcommittee. Just to give you some background, the Standards of Practice are the governing rules that we have that form the minimum of standards that we have to perform on every inspection. And the Standards of Practice Subcommittee goes over, and they're currently in the middle of a review of all those standards from start to finish. So that there's no specific direction as far as we want this to change. Sometimes it's just little minor non-substantive changes. Sometimes it's big things that as the industry changes, we have to update the standards and make sure we're following the times. But I'm sure they will break in pretty quickly. And how that normally works is the chair of that subcommittee will call for a meeting aside from these meetings. Sometimes in person, most of the time they're probably going to be online so that you don't have to take a lot of time away from what you're doing. And then that subcommittee reports back to the main committee and goes from there. Do you have any questions on that?
I don't.
Very good.
Can I throw something out?
Sure.
Changing the topic just a bit. We get new members all the time, and at least I hardly know who they are. I think it'd be great if new members could introduce themselves and tell us who they are, what they do.
There you go.
Thought.
No pressure that you're the one you remember, but no, it would be great. And tell us a little bit about yourself. Absolutely.
Fair enough.
It might be good to do the whole committee for purposes of our meeting.
Sure. We'll start with the new one.
My name is Cole Robinson. I've got a Class A air conditioning license. I've been in construction my entire life. Currently, I'm doing business consulting and processing systems. I got a degree in construction science from Texas A&M, an MBA from University of Houston. Taught for a while skilled trades at Lone Star College. I'm really into getting skilled trades and improving the construction industry. So that's kind of what brought me here.
Yeah, Randy Bayer. I'm a licensed professional inspector. Have an ICC combination inspector certification on my own inspection company for about 13 years now. Retired custom home builder, past president of the Greater Houston Builders Association, Texas Association of Builders, and a lifetime director of the National Association of Builders.
Yep. My name's Lee Warren. I've been on this committee this is year 13. Should only be 12, but it's 13. It's the Steve Reinhardt rule. But I've been an inspector for 20 years now. I have two companies, inspection company and real estate company, but yeah, let's go forward.
Ed Mute, I'm a public member. I'm a licensed architect here in the Austin area. I guess I'm on
Second year, you guys started.
a whole year ago.
Yeah.
now, So.
Mike Morgan, inspected in 22 years. I have a small inspection company in Abilene. I think I'm on my 6th year, if I remember right.
Stephanie Huser, new year, new name. It's officially been changed, so still the same person. Been inspecting 9 years, Corpus Christi, South Texas area. And I've got mold license and basically just doing the dream.
Rhonda Riley. I'm a owner and founder of an inspection company, been licensed professional inspector since 2003, and been on this committee a year. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I guess it goes around to me.
Sure.
Mike Marlowe.
This is my first in-person meeting. I was on up there last time with a short notice, but I'm down in Bandera outside of San Antonio. I have a small inspection firm down there. Been doing inspections for this is our 13th year, I think. But yeah, we also do mold, lead, termite, all that too. So
Gluttons for punishment. Okay.
when you're out in the country like we are, if you don't do it, you ain't getting called.
Yeah.
So didn't skip staff intentionally. They're going to introduce themselves as they do their staff report. So we can get through that. All right. Ratification of the minutes of the July 15 and the October 14 meeting. The last meeting we had to pull the July minutes, some corrections and clarifications. So we don't need a vote on this. Is there anybody has any modifications for either of those two sets of minutes? Oh, hearing none, those will stand ratified. Item 8, advisory committee training. Miss Abby.
Right, let me get the PowerPoint up here. Okay, I'm gonna stand. So this is something that we've been doing for the last couple of years at the chair's request, and it's something we've been doing with all of the advisory committees. And we think it's helpful, hopefully you will too, just to kind of get a better sense and overall sense of what the commission does, what its function is, and then what your role and how that fits into that function. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the Real Estate Commission. We are a state agency. We are the government. And as such, our role, our obligation is to safeguard the public interest and protect consumers of real estate services. And how do we do that? We do that through education, we do that through licensing, and we do that through enforcement. You'll hear about all of that today. And we do that to ensure the availability of qualified service providers. But there's also a balance that comes into play, and that is facilitating economic growth. So that's the toggle there, is consumer protection while balancing that economic growth. That's something that the agency is always mindful of. So the commission itself is, much like you, composed of 9 members. And unlike you, these members are appointed by the governor. There are 6 members that are broker members. They bring that experience, that background with them to their service on the commission. And of course, there's some specific requirements that they have to satisfy to be able to serve. And then we have 3 public members, as you do as well, to bring that public consumer perspective to the commission. And something I think it's important to know, and I know Chelsea has brought this up before, that although they come with that background, the goal, the mission of the agency is always front of mind. So just because, we have 3 public members doesn't mean that's the only perspective that they bring or the only consideration that they have. They serve as the mission for the agency, which is consumer protection while balancing that economic growth aspect. So all policy making decisions of the commission center on these concepts. Consumer protection. How do you do that without stifling economic growth? Always keeping that in mind. I know I sound like a bit of a broken record, but it's important. So that's the commission. We also have advisory committees, and advisory committees really serve as an extension of the commission itself, but have very important and distinct functions depending on what advisory committee we're talking about. And today, the inspector committee. But they are, they consist of stakeholders. They represent different areas of the industry, and they will make recommendations to the full commission related to rulemaking policies, anything that's within their purpose or purview. One of the really important things that not only the advisory committees have to consider, but the commission as well, is sort of the barriers or the limitations with within which we can function. So I know you've heard Vanessa talk about this a lot, but the first bullet point here is the governor's letter from 2019. For those of you not familiar with that letter was written by the governor and really focuses on reducing barriers to entry. Whatever we do, we have to be mindful in whatever actions we take that we're not putting up unreasonable barriers to entry that would keep people out of the industry that otherwise should be in the industry. So that's always an important consideration that we have. There's also something called the Regulatory Compliance Division of the governor. So this is a group, an office that was established, gosh, maybe 5 years or so ago. And its main function is to look at things like anti-competitive actions by state agencies. How can agencies promote the interests of consumers and also keep the market going? And so this is an important office that will actually review proposed rules or actions taken by an agency. And sometimes, and we know this has happened with inspector rules before, they can make recommendations to change them if they feel that there is an anti-competitive or anti-market impact. And sometimes they can even slow the process down significantly. So that's another thing to be mindful of whenever we look at proposed rules or any policies or things that affect the market. And then last, but certainly not least, we have our statute. And so you all are governed by, there's two statutes, but primarily Chapter 1102 of the Occupations Code. It really sets forth how inspectors are regulated by the Real Estate Commission. It even creates you, the committee. And so it's always something that whenever we think about, whether we have authority to do something, we always have to think, what does the statute say? What does it authorize? What can we do? What is something that we may need some authority to go to the legislature for? And that kind of goes goes hand in hand with rulemaking as well. That statute gives us the authority to make specific rules. So as I mentioned, you as the inspector committee are established under Chapter 1102, and you're actually pretty unique in that the statute does this. A lot of statutes are a little bit more vague in what they specify an advisory committee has to look like. But in Chapter 1102, it actually says that your function and your purpose and your role is to recommend rules for licensing, standards of practice, ethics, and there's reasonable fees as well. So you have a lot on your plate, a lot to consider. And the statute really lays all of that out. You have some additional kind of a catch-all provision as well that gives you some additional authority or obligation. So I know you all know this, but for those of you who may not, so the inspector committee consists of 6 members and then 3 public members. 6 members who have been engaged in the practice of real estate. There's some requirements there similar to what you see on the commission side, 5 years in the business, and then 3 public members who represent the interests of the public and are not registered, certified, or licensed by an occupational or regulatory agency in the real estate industry. So that kind of helps keep that public perspective for this group. So 6 inspector members, 3 public members. This is the last slide, and then I'm going to show you a video. So an important thing to think about as members of the inspector committee is what role you are serving or what role you're playing, the hat that you're wearing. You certainly all have private lives, your own business to think of, but when you're here, you are here in your capacity as a committee member serving the interests of the commission. And so that's just important to think of. For instance, speaking in favor or against a particular company can have some ramifications. I'll start with the third bullet point there first. There's certainly can be legal issues. That's always the scariest. But maybe more commonly, you can have that perceived favoritism if you speak in favor of something, or perceived bias if you speak in favor or against a particular business. So it's just something to be mindful of, that can have an impact that can lead to loss of trust by the consumer and in the regulated industries as well. So that's all I have to say. I'm going to set up this next slide here a little bit, which is it's a little video clip from a recent Sunset Commission meeting. I'm not sure if everyone knows what the Sunset Advisory Commission is, but essentially, if you don't know, it's a state agency that's purpose is to review other state agencies, to really make recommendations for improvement, determine if that agency should even still exist. So this is something that every state agency goes through. It actually went through a really limited, it was a limited purpose, what it was called, Sunset Review earlier last year. It was related to seller's disclosure. So it wasn't kind of the all-encompassing Sunset Review that you might typically hear about. But as we were attending a meeting or a hearing for our review, and before they got to the Real Estate Commission, we actually heard them say that a particular commission member say this about another state agency. And we thought, gosh, this is actually a really helpful statement and kind of brings the points home that we talk about in these advisory committee trainings. And so we wanted to share it with you. So I've got a mute on the surface here, which will mute it for everyone to be able to play the audio here. So just a second. Okay, so that's all I've got. Any questions about any of that? Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, number 9, general comments from visitors or written comments on non-agenda items. So we have a few that are in the materials here. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to go through those. I don't want to go through these one by one. Just keep in mind, due to the Meetings Act, we can't have conversations about getting in the nuts and bolts of these. This is basically to ask staff any clarifying questions or see if we want to throw this on a future agenda for further discussion. So the first one is in regards to inspectors using zip levels for foundations. I have my own kind of personal thoughts on gray area there. My personal thought is this might be something we send to the SOP subcommittee to at least look at, because I think it's worth the conversation. And then if SOP subcommittee comes up with some possible suggestions or whatnot, bring it to the full committee, kind of go from there. I know this is an ongoing concern that we have had in the industry for some time, and it's becoming a little bit more of a concern. I don't know if there's a whole lot we can do there, because the standards are the minimum standards. If people want to exceed them and do certain things, every time you exceed the standards, you increase your liability, but you can also increase your value. So,
but they've also got to have the requisite knowledge
I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
But that's already addressed.
And that is in our
Yeah.
standards. You have to have the competence to do that. So that could be,
Yeah.
I mean, I may be wrong, but that could be also a violation. Something says, hey, somebody said this is out of whack, and if they lack that knowledge, hard part is proving that they don't, have that expertise. If they took a class or whatnot, they may think that has covered that. But like I said, I don't want to get the nuts and bolts of it. Like I said, I don't want to get too far down. But I mean, is everybody good with sending that to SOP subcommittee to look at possible revisions?
Absolutely.
looking
Yeah, they're
at
also
how-
talking about, like thermal sensors, thermal
Thermal
cameras,
sensor, yeah.
and so forth.
Yeah, there's a number of those.
Yeah,
And you
basically.
talk like sewer scopes and those types of things too, but maybe looking at the
Yeah.
competency, verbiage and language and see if we can't shore that up if it needs to.
Specialized equipment in general.
Okay, are we good with that? So you can put that on your list. Okay. All right, the next one was the advertising one. So I think if enforcement, what is your take on this? I have my own. So can you clarify what Brian is talking about here and what comments you may have on that as far as how the rules, clarification of the rules as far as that general comment is concerned?
And I will jump in here just to say, I think enforcement responded to the first part of his question. They forwarded it to us to share with y'all for that kind of the middle of the page. There's a recommendation there for the inspector committee that inspector firms should be required to hold a license similar to brokerages so that there is less ambiguity regarding advertising and ethics. And then provide some background there as well.
We had that as back in 2006, I think 2007 is when that started, that inspector companies also had to have a license. And that quickly, right after I got that license, that quickly went away. That was a great, awesome time. But because it is becoming more prevalent, I mean, I think it's something that's should be up for discussion again. Especially, it's a big part of the whole advertising rules is making sure the public knows who we are, that we're actually licensed, so on and so forth. And if they have, I don't have to put every individual license number in there. Well, if their company has a license, at least the consumer, if they see an advertising piece, they have something to go back, a license number, a company name to go back, track down those types of things. So.
Yeah, so I think, his specific request, I think, would be something statutory, but, there may be something that we can look at on the rules side from an advertising perspective. And see if there's any there.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see us look at the advertising rules again anyway, because I think there's still some gray area questions in there. And similar to what you had on the video, it's like, well, it doesn't say I can't do it, so I'm going to do this.
Yeah, we can certainly add that for the agenda in April.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yep.
All right. So for that next meeting, we'll, if everybody can kind of really delve into and read through the advertising rules, and we'll be pretty well prepared for that. I'm sure it will be an interesting discussion. Don't doubt it at all. All right, the third one was regarding the practicum. So there are some concerns about students being able, once they finish their coursework, to find someone who is allowed or certified, whatever you want to call it, to provide the practicum for them. Currently, the way it sits, TREIC had to remove all of the contact information off the website, so you can't really have that. There's a recommendation here, a possible suggestion here, to have maybe a voluntary list of practicum instructors that upon request could be provided. Could we not do that?
So we included this here. We wanted to bring up a couple of things. So one, certainly you talked about Senate Bill 510, and Vanessa is a real expert on that. So I will let her talk about all things related to but one thing that we're doing on the broker sales agent side that we wanted to this was a good opportunity to have this conversation as well, is we are looking at language to essentially address the limitations in Senate Bill 510 in 1101 of the Occupations Code, which is the statute that touches on real estate brokers and agents. We did not also do that for your chapter 1102. partly because there seemed to be a direction that the committee, or a request that the committee had really focused on the last couple of years of removing contact information from the website instead of putting it on there. So we didn't initially think about 1102 or think that would be something you were interested in. But we thought, gosh, this is a good opportunity to have that conversation. If there's interest with y'all putting that information back out there, that's something we could look at legislatively while we're also looking at this on the broker sales agent side as well. And so I'll let Vanessa also.
Yeah, and I'll note, so SB 510 is what we always refer to it as. It amended the Public Information Act to prohibit occupational licensing agency from releasing the personal contact information of license holders. And oddly enough, any email address, forget personal versus professional. And so as Abby mentioned, we've, on the broker sales agent side, there's a lot of frustration with that because it can be hard to find people, right? And we've done what we can in that regard in terms of, we have county up, which hopefully will limit the number of Lee Warrens. You're not getting all of them in the state.
There's so many.
There's so many. No, there's really only one, Lee. You know that. And so in looking at that, some of the steps we're trying to, we're exploring. There's some that might, maybe there's a change to that statute this legislative session, and looking at what that could look like, but it would mirror what we've got in our housekeeping bill, which would be the collection of the specific collection of business contact information, right? So making that distinction. And, it's going to mean that when we collect the information in our new database, like we're making it very clear, this is your business contact information. It is not confidential, that can get us back up and running. Hasn't happened yet, right? We're in ledge season now. Housekeeping bill isn't even out there. So what Abby's talking about would be similar on the inspector side. Now, what's interesting is what she mentioned, which is that inspectors, this committee weighed in on this, I think probably right when about 5 years ago. And I was like, well, gosh, a lot of folks they work out of their home, right? And so we don't actually want our home addresses, et cetera, on the website. So this would be an interesting one in terms of, maybe we're, I don't know, we'd have to think about what we would actually collect that we would want to display, but this group, right, you'd want to weigh in on what that would look like, because there's been that movement of, well, we don't really want our personal information out there. We also have to do the balance of what's got to be the business contact information as we collect it. And then, maybe for you guys, business email address is enough, right? Or something along those lines. I think there's probably a little bit more distinct consideration based on this industry. But at this time, we really can't even voluntarily say, oh, yes, I'd love to give you this list of contact information because state law prohibits it. And we know that, that's a hard balance, right? Because we know there's folks who want it and need it for a legitimate business reason, but we're also, the goal behind 510 is to protect personal privacy.
So I think the big issue previously was that brokerages usually have brick and mortar. It's a commercial building. You put the address up there, it's not a big deal. With inspectors, so many inspectors are sole proprietors that business address is their personal home, and people coming up to their personal home, which has happened. And so that was the issue there. I think for this I think is more specific, that could we not ask anybody who is qualified to provide the practicum to, what if they fill out a form or whatever, to track and notify, yes, we're going to be giving out your information. But the only person that gets that is the student who has actually applied for a license.
No, because there's not an opt-in, opt-out component in the statute. In fact, in that same bill, they took the opt-in, opt-out away from the state bar, who did it that way. And so we're really seeing a true prohibition. Like I said, if this is something generally that the inspector committee is interested in terms of, well, we do want some business contact information out there, I think we could explore what that language would look like in a change to 1102.
I mean, I'm good with, at least on this narrow scope, because this, I think, could be construed as if somebody is trying to get into the industry, it could be considered a barrier if they're having a hard time finding somebody to teach that practice.
I always thought it was the schools were supposed to be setting them up with that, but
There's a lot of schools that no, we do the classes, you do the practicum wherever you want.
Shannon Gatewood, and I'll apologize at the very beginning because I'm going to get the verbiage wrong. When I look up a real estate agent, it tells me whether they're a supervisor and sponsoring designated supervisor. Is there not a checkbox as a step one to this process that you can add to the licensing to say, I'm a sponsoring inspector, I'm a practicum instructor? That way, those people that are looking to join a company, that apprentice or a real estate inspector, can go on and look up, oh, this guy's in my area, he's a sponsoring inspector, that's a potential job lead. Or I'm working on getting my license, I'm looking for a practicum instructor. My school that I went to didn't help me out, but I can at least go on there and say, oh yeah, Lee Warren's a practicum instructor, and I can figure out how to find his information, because obviously we can't. I don't know.
Because they put the county with it.
Right.
So you can kind of narrow it down to your county.
That's what I think that could be
And
a
your
step one
DBA's on there.
to
Sure, easy way to do
eventually
it.
getting contact information.
Is there a way to search practicum providers? Or is it just the class? No, because we don't do that.
Right. It's not a course that providers can apply to offer any longer. It is, true field training where the qualified inspector, per the definition of the qualifications in the rule, is eligible to become, to teach, to perform the field training, right? And we don't, it's outside of our regulatory purview. They don't come to us and say, I want to be approved as somebody who can instruct the practicum.
That's right, because I forgot we took it out of there.
Mm-hmm.
I think what the best thing to do, and Shannon, I get your perspective, and maybe it is as easy as doing that. I can't tell you that right now. Usually when there's a checkbox presented, IT is like, stop right now. Right.
It's a whole lot of work.
For a tiny checkbox, yeah, exactly. It makes me really respect whenever I see a checkbox now anywhere. But we can take this feedback on this comment and look at possible alternatives and then update you all. Because I don't know that we've dug down into the how. I think it's more, is there interest, and is there interest on the bigger scale of contact info? It's sounding kind of like no, but
Outside of that, alternatively, I do know that some of our education providers do make available a list, like through their contacts with inspectors, and make that available to students. These individuals are willing and qualified. And that's something that even just as, we could do through a communication initiative, is just to encourage more providers to do that.
Yeah. I think overall, from a TREIC perspective, if there's anything we can do to help students find practicum instructors, I think is really what the end goal is. And I think that really correlates with what we're talking about, reducing barriers to entry and trying to make it easier. Because I think that it's a problem. It may not be a problem in Dallas County or here in Austin or whatnot, but it may be a problem in your more rural areas to find somebody to do that practicum. And that's why we don't allow sponsorships. That's how all that started. Yeah. Is because of those outlying areas. So
Yeah, well, Fred's out in El Paso, isn't he? Am I thinking of the right guy?
no, he's here.
Oh, there, you're right.
I was like,
He's kind of hidden.
Yeah, right. You're not out of El Paso, or am I thinking?
San Antonio,
Okay.
neighbor.
Okay.
Well, we can certainly look into that, like Vanessa said, and circle back with you all.
Would there be, and I can be wrong on this, because I know one of the complaints people get is the spam component of it, but you know, to the extent, I don't know if there's an appetite for a business email to be displayed, and I don't know if we could get it through, but I'd be interested to hear what, because we know that there are folks that hate having their email on there because they get 9,000 spam emails. That's probably the complaint we got the most, actually. But there's also, if it's a business email and you've got it set up, there may be a component to that that allows a level of access that is beneficial to the consumer. Because what we know we've got consumers or their agents who are trying to find folks, right? And they're going to our website. So I don't know, I'm just trying to see, do you think there might generally be a thought behind the email address, or do you all also hate the spam?
Me personally, I'm okay with email address and phone number, to be honest, because it doesn't matter my number. It's all our numbers are out there. I do you have your healthcare yet? No, I don't. So I mean, all that's done. My big concern on the contact information was the address. Yeah. That was my concern, because it's not, I'm at 100 Main Street in my building, and at 5 o'clock that building's closed, or whatever the case may be. And if you want to do something stupid, that's fine. But now my personal home address is listed for any Yahoo to see, and that became an issue more than once. And so that's my concern, is it's a safety issue.
Yeah, and I think that's what the bill's trying to address. I think this feedback is really good for us. And it, SB 510 is bigger than TREIC. It was everyone, all the licensing agencies. But we've been working with folks and internally and externally to see what options there might be. So I think this is helpful. Like Abby said, we hadn't contemplated it as much in the inspector world because we had always taken that off. And I don't know if that has anything to say or anything.
Did I get the gist of what you were trying to put in there?
I think that most of
I make him do it all the time.
I'm Fred Buck. And the reason for that question was not only just for folks that want to teach the practicum, but we're inviting people to get into this business. And once they have a license, they've done all this work, passed these exams and paid all this money, they deserve to have their phones ring. And so if they're licensed, they'd like for the public to be able to go to a state site. Yes, you're licensed, and here's how I can contact you, whether it be by a phone number or email address. To me, this is just common sense. And hopefully we can work together in the legislative process to make the changes or the improvements, to put things back, because I think the pendulum just swinging the wrong direction too far. And there's significant consequences as a result of this bad legislation.
Anybody else?
We've got what we need.
I think we beat that horse down. Right. So if we can put that on the agenda for the next meeting too, just so we can get some follow-up on that. Perfect. And I think that was all the general comments we had. Are there any other general comments from visitors that is regarding a non-agenda item? Not you. Staff report. Executive division, including legislative update, please.
All right, I'm Chelsea Buckholz. I'll come up here just for so you don't have to turn your head. I'm not going to talk for long. I'm executive director of TREIC and TALCB. Cole, welcome. For your benefit and really for everyone's, I thought I would just introduce our staff and kind of tell you how we all fit together. I am part of our executive division to just lead the agency. Others within our executive division include Vanessa as our new deputy executive director, formerly general counsel. Abby Lee, you've met, our general counsel. Kathleen Santos. Kathleen is our general counsel for TALCB, the appraiser side of things, and also deputy general counsel for TREIC. And we have assigned her the task of becoming an expert on all things inspectors. So she's well on her way. Have I hit everybody in exec? I think so. Oh, here we go. Summer Mandel. Summer handles communications in our legislative process, and she's actually going to talk next. So we do three things at TREIC. We educate, we license, we enforce, right? On the education side of things, we have Jennifer Wheeler, our Director of Education and Examination Services. Thank you. And we have Rebecca Bennett, who works with Jennifer in our education department, and also Mike Sampledale behind them. Just wave. Okay, I think that's everybody in exec, in education. Yep. Okay, Denise, wave. Denise Sample, Mike Sampledale and Denise Sample are not related. But Denise handles is director of our licensing division. And then for the enforcement side of things, we have Tony Renteria, who handles all things enforcement for inspectors. And then Mike Malloy is the director of our enforcement division, and also John Knoppick is in enforcement. Have I missed any staff? I think I got us all. Okay, you heard that we have some staffing changes. I'm really excited about kind of the shift in general counsel and deputy executive director. We will also hire another attorney who you may see about, if you don't even know who that is just yet. And then one additional shift is that with Tony's retirement, Tony was our previous deputy executive director. He handled all of our legislative issues, and Summer helped him. Now Summer is leading the charge on all things legislative. I'm going to pass it to her to provide just a little bit of an update on both communications and where we stand on legislative issues. Have I missed anything? No? Okay, awesome. I always miss some things.
So, hi all. I know most of you, but like Chelsea said, I do two things that sound very separate, but they're actually quite similar. So my official title is Government and Strategic Communications Director. And a lot of you guys have heard me telling other committees or the commission that the government part is becoming more obvious now of what I'm supposed to do there. But first I wanted to give you a comms update. So as you know, you guys have a newsletter that goes out to people who are interested. They're either inspectors or they want to become inspectors, or they're just interested in the industry. That goes out quarterly. It's typically after this meeting. We have messages that come from your chair, and then other maybe Q&A topics, things like that. So we recently moved from one email platform to a different one. There were some complications and frustrations with our old one, but I'm happy to report that the new one seems to be going a lot more smoothly. So I wanted to give you an update on that with your open rate. So we shifted to that new platform late last year. The first email for Inspector Insight went out in November. That went to 21,785 subscribers, and the open rate was 62%. So that's incredible, especially compared to what we had with our last platform, and a 2% click-through rate, which is pretty average for email marketing stuff. But the open rate is very high, and I know that Lee, you were really interested in getting that up there around the same as TREIC Advisor and some of our other newsletters. So it looks like we're getting there. And then we also have a very easy way to sign up to receive this newsletter. If you go to trec.texas.gov/newsletters, you'll find the landing page to sign up for all of them, including Inspector Insight. So that's my communications hat that I'll take off and put on my government relations hat. So part of the job is to track all the bills that are filed and see how they would either affect the industries we regulate or the agency itself and how we operate. And so right now we're tracking 172 bills. The majority of those are related to agency operations, not necessarily specific to the industry. There's been, as of this morning, more than 3,000 bills filed. It was 3,014, but then like 5 more got filed during this meeting. So it just keeps ticking up. None of the bills that we're tracking right now are in any committees. So there's quite a process you got to go through before a bill becomes a law. And I can talk to you about that outside of this update if you're interested. But I think you're probably most interested in the education, the apprentice education bill. So this was a recommendation by the committee to add 4 hours of pre-licensing education for apprentice inspectors. The intent for that is that they just have a better foundation when they're going into people's homes. So the update that I can give you is that we have been in touch with legislative office, and they're reviewing the bill right now to determine how that fits into their legislative agenda. So more on that to come, but hopefully we'll have an author for that sooner rather than later, but I think things are looking good there. So that's pretty much it, unless y'all have questions or comments.
Anybody have any questions for Chelsea or Summer? I will say thank you, because I know last year was very frustrating with the email stuff and there was a lot of back and forth and whatnot, but I know that you worked diligently to try to get that done. I greatly appreciate the efforts, because it does seem to be flowing much smoother now, and I'm getting a lot less calls about the fact that they're not getting them. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right. Thanks, y'all.
All right. Enforcement Division.
Good morning, Tony Renteria, Enforcement Staff Attorney and Liaison to the Inspector Committee. First of all, welcome, Cole. Good to have you on the committee. Just briefly, for your benefit, enforcement, we investigate complaints that are filed and we proceed with disciplinary action whenever it's appropriate. I've been with the commission for about 10 years, going on 10 years now, and I've been handling inspector cases this whole entire time. We do rely on the help, assistance, and expertise of the inspector committee members. On occasion, we do have cases that require an expert opinion, and some of the committee members do provide us with those expert opinions so we can reach the right resolution. And basically, every meeting, we do put together a disciplinary inspection, disciplinary action report that where we put in all the formal disciplinary action that we take against license holders, inspectors. In this report, there's only 3 orders. But if you have any questions, we do include the links in the report so you can review the order. And if you have any questions about the order, just let us know. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So typically when an order comes out, just for your information, Cole, when there's an enforcement action that comes out, enforcement's been really good on sending us what that is so that we can actually go through it. It'll be a link. It has the whole order. It tells you a lot more detail than the little 2-liners you get on the TREIC website. But they're really good. If you ever have questions, just email them directly, whatnot. It's nice for us as committee members, because occasionally when one of these orders gets published on TREIC's website, we get the call. Hey, why did they get hit for this? And so it's nice to be able to have some background information on that. So, yep.
Shannon Gatewood once again. I've spoken with probably everybody on the enforcement committee last meeting, just kind of in passing. And that got me looking at into things a little deeper. So I did a search on violations since 1 January of 2020, and I came up with 8 different violations of people operating as an inspector with either 0 license, expired license, inactive license. And based on the conversations from the last meeting, TREIC has 0 enforcement authority over them. They can issue the fine, issue the cease and desist, but this one that just came out, $27,000 as a fine, and he's just going to ignore it. Same thing with the one from
Jeffrey Wayne Gardner.
Yeah, from a year, not quite a year ago, about 8 months ago now. He's been fined twice, 2 cease and desist letters, and he's still operating as a building consultant. In fact, he replied to my Facebook post on one of the real estate groups in San Antonio saying, hey, real estate agents, do your due diligence, make sure you know who you're referring so that you don't get in trouble. And he replied to that with some veiled threats on me and all that stuff. But he's still out there operating. He posts videos of him with the real estate sign in the background saying, hey, I'm here as a building consultant helping this client out. How do we close that loop on, because the Attorney General, the DA, they're not chasing these type of cases. So how do we, as an inspector community, as as TREC, licensing agency, all that, how do we close that loop? And I mean, it's a huge consumer protection issue to me. If anybody can hang a shingle and say, hey, I'm an inspector, I can do this, and TREC really has no way to stop them.
It's the eternal question. I mean, I wish there was a good answer for it. I know that we went through this years ago with the other gentleman. He's got what, like 6 or something, 8 something complaints filed against him. The big thing is, and back when that happened, I know that what we did locally up in our area was spread the word. Hey, this guy does not have a license, whatnot. And I think that started to slowly trickle that down because eventually that word gets out there. But I presented it to like a lot of the agents that I knew were referring them. It's like, look, if you refer somebody who's not licensed, this can put you in a liable position too, because you're a licensed person. You're supposed to be, looking out for the consumer, and you're referring somebody who does not have a license that is supposed to have one. And I mean, that was one way that we help. I just don't know if there's anything we can do, because you're right. The DAs aren't going after. We tried.
Yeah, go ahead.
That was going to be my question is, if agents are allowing these people to do inspections for their clients, TREC has authority over the agents.
Absolutely.
Is there something we can do through the agents?
We're limited to whatever jurisdiction we have. So we only have certain, enforcement mechanisms. And we certainly can take, action against an unlicensed individual in terms of an order and administrative penalties. And the administrative penalties, they do go to the Attorney General for collections. So it does affect their credit if they don't, they don't pay the action. It does go on their credit. It affects them. Some people don't care, It also is a criminal offense for a person to engage in a licensed activity. But as Lee said, that is up to the discretion of the district attorneys to prosecute those offenses. They have to be, obviously approached. And it has happened where they respond, district attorneys do respond to criminal activity. I don't know about unlicensed activity, but whenever there's related criminal activity with brokerage activity, for example, we have seen an increase interest from district attorneys and police. I work for the Houston region, and I've seen an increase of interest in police agencies investigating those crimes. But
around like serious felonies and unlicensed activity in general, even for brokers and sales agents, it's a misdemeanor offense. Right. So,
but we've also seen all this Class A.
That balance of like prosecutorial discretion and how much time and everything like that goes into it. We have historically not found any DA or county attorney that would.
Yeah. I mean,
obviously, attorney says like we will send it over if it's over $5,000. The special limit for collections. We'll send it over to the Attorney General's office. They will, get involved and perhaps get a judgment against the person, and that may, deter them from doing this stuff further. It really, but that's our limitation in regards to cease and desist and fines. Which,
I mean, there's been
like we talk about staying in our lane with the legislature. I mean, that's what our lane and our duty is.
Yeah.
If there are agents that like repeatedly, refer people that aren't licensed, it potentially could be negligence on their behalf. So there could be complaints filed there. So I mean, those are your options in these situations.
If you think about why we have our hands tied, if you look at the enforcement options that we have, it's kind of based on that, right? So we can issue fines. We can suspend a license. Yeah. We can revoke a license. Well, if you don't have a license, it's just, we don't have very many tools in our tool chest. One of the things we do have in our tool chest is education. So it might be that there's room to educate sales agents and brokers to watch out for this type of promotion, right? That you need to refer a licensed inspector, building consultant. It's not that. I mean, there might be something a building consultant does that is not a violation. I don't know. I don't know the differential, but.
So based on that, because I've always, anytime I do marketing or class or whatnot, I say, hey, you all have your list of inspectors or whatnot. Look at that list on occasion, make sure they're actually still licensed, make sure they're actually still alive, because I've run into that too. But is there a clarifying rule on the brokerage or the agent side that could be used as a deterrent to say basically, hey, if you knowingly refer, or if you refer somebody for something that is a licensed activity that they are not licensed for, that could be a violation for them?
I think that's what Mike was saying, that there's possibly an avenue there through like negligence, if you have knowledge about this. But it just depends on the complaint that we got.
Yeah, but I mean, would there be a way to kind of shore that up in the rule to make that a little more clear? Because the negligence seems like a little gray area to me.
Well, the more broader we have, the better rules we have, to be honest. The more specified in rules, you get real, because then we have to go into a factual basis type of things. And like, if the facts don't meet up directly with what happened in that situation with the rule, then we may not have that. I really like negligence because very broad and we can argue more generously.
Yeah, because if you look at these complaints, this meeting, if you include the apprentice inspector lacking supervision, we've got 3 or 4 that were not licensed at the time of the inspection. I know the disciplinary action, like for one, was failed to respond to requests for information, but then when you open it up, they weren't licensed inspectors. So we've got 2 pages of complaints and orders, and 3 to 4 of them were lack of a active inspector's license. So I feel like we've got some people trying to bend the rules, and they know that they're just going to get their hands slapped and laugh at TREIC and their $27,000 fine, and probably keep on doing what they're doing.
People bend the rules all the time, and part of the issue is not just with this, but with a lot of other rules. TREIC's not a policing agency. I mean, they can't do anything. Their hands are tied until somebody actually files a complaint. But if you don't file a complaint, you're perpetuating the problem. There's other issues there too.
Well, and I would like to say, with regard to trying to go discipline the agents, right? Ultimately, the agents can't say, use this inspector. The only thing the agents are doing is presenting selection of people, right? So it's the consumer is ultimately responsible for the individual that they choose to perform the service for them.
And with social media and marketing directly to the consumer and those avenues, there's a lot of times that the consumer goes around the agent in their list and hires somebody that has cool videos on social media without understanding the licensing involved for consumer protection. And so that's how the one guy's getting away with it as the building consultant, because the consumers watch him on social media possibly, and not understanding that he's not actually licensed to do their inspection.
Well, if we had a company license number, it'd be much easier to put up there.
So if someone is unlicensed, which is Class A misdemeanor, correct? And then once there's an agreed order, or whatever the judgment may be, then no one here at the commission sends it over to the DA in the county, says, here you go, and just it pushes it off to them, and then it's up to the county DA to do anything? Are they being informed by your office? Basically, we have one for you.
We don't have an automatic system where we send orders to the district attorneys to file charges. I think in the past, like Mike was saying, in the past, we have not, the DAs have not been receptive to that type of prosecution. So there's no mechanism to do that automatically. And that's, it's unfortunate, but that is the law provides that for them to be able to do that. But whether they choose or decide not to prosecute, that's within their discretion.
But how do they know if it's out there to make that decision whether they want to continue or not?
Well, I think a person that files a complaint with us normally is a victim of the complaint. So like any other crime, the person can decide to call the police, report a crime, or they can, or, file a complaint with us. So I think the complainant could also report it. So, I mean, that would be one way to do it.
I mean, we can try to find ways to throw it in there, but we've been through some egregious stuff, like on the brokerage side, what's her name? And I mean, that was on the fraud, that's some pretty high fraud level stuff, and the DA still wouldn't touch it.
Yeah, I mean, I understand if they don't want to do it, that's their prerogative, but at least for the state to send it over, just to
Your
inform.
burden of proof for criminal stuff is higher than we are. We're just a preponderance, so we just need to get to that 51%. And a lot of these people that don't answer the complaints and it just becomes a default, he'd send that over to the DA, they'd be like, great, I can't even use this in court. Because I have to go and prove up that he actually did these actions, have witnesses and all that stuff. Now, we may have some of that information in file, but like I said, Tony said, historically, they're like, well, we want you to do 85% of the work and, I mean, we've tried to turn on people that really have done some serious things and have harmed people in the hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages. And they just say, it's a civil matter.
Yeah.
Take it to court.
Yeah, that's.
And when we look at it, I mean, historically, it's not unlicensed activity. We take it very serious. It's a priority one thing. I don't want to discount it at any pace, but historically, really haven't seen a whole lot of unlicensed activity in the inspector world. I've been here for 15 years. You have like isolated things like the individual that, Lee's talking about is one person, and, it's not like a lot of people that do it. But I mean, but those one bad actors, they may get like 3 complaints. So then it makes it look like on a report, like we have a major issue in the industry where it may be just one person in that area where the league had a good idea of getting that message out and say, hey, this person isn't licensed. You need to be careful because you're not going to be covered. Because the best if you file a complaint against the person, they're going to, just get another unlicensed activity, cease and desist.
Yeah.
That might be I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said the guy with the 27K fine, you read through there, he was cease and desisted multiple times or reminded by TREIC that, hey, your license ain't active. And he went for 12 years before it was actually me that caught him and filed a complaint. But yeah.
I mean, you're going to have bad eggs every industry.
Yeah. So, how many more are out there is my question.
In general, like the inspectors, we haven't historically seen that. That's isolated bad eggs.
Yeah. Is it that there's not a lot of bad eggs, or are they not getting caught?
They're not getting.
Well, I don't know. That would be some in the
my
industry
concern.
that files complaints, and we're always open to welcome those.
Well, there's another one that I know just probably popped in y'all's inboxes from last week, Shannon? Yeah.
Sounds like the issues in San Antonio.
Hey, where's
It's everywhere.
I was gonna mention, part of this, it's sounding like it's maybe there could be some benefit from communications or education. And one of the things I was gonna mention is, we're currently working on legal 1 and 2 right now and kind of forming that course. So that could be something that could be included if you're seeing issues on the broker side, agent side of, hey, you're recommending folks that aren't licensed. That might be something to include in the course.
I think that's a great piece to put in at least a component there. Just as it relates to liability, if you're a licensed person and you have a referral list, and if you could be held accountable or liable if you refer somebody who is not licensed, and it could be negligence because you just didn't bother to check.
Right.
I use a story in some of my education stuff. It's like, hey, you don't want to put me on the list, that's fine, but check the list that you have and make sure that they're actually licensed. Because I got put on one a few years back. There were 6 names. 2 of them were not licensed. 1 of them was dead. It's like, I'm pretty sure that guy's not calling you back when you call him. I'm just saying. But it was, they hadn't updated that list. Half their list was unlicensed. So
And I think that also, not just on the inspector side, electrician, plumber, if they have they have an HVAC guy that they recommend, make sure that guy's license didn't expire and he just went rogue. I mean, just in general. Make sure you're periodically checking your referral list for license.
And Lee, I just want to mention there is a rule, 220, 220C3, I'm sorry, D3. It says that if an inspector has knowledge of a possible violation of the rules of the commission or chapter 1102, the inspector should report a possible violation to the commission.
Absolutely.
So
That's
I
on
think,
both sides. That's Inspector Hayes. If you know somebody's
Yeah.
breaking the rule, it's your responsibility by.
so if it's
by-
if an inspector, just for public reference, if an inspector becomes aware of someone doing these kind of inspections, then there is a rule that says that they should report it. File a complaint, because like Lee was saying, if we don't know about it, we can't do anything to enforce it. And maybe some people are not deterred, but others may be deterred by a TREIC investigation, and disciplinary action, high penalties. I mean, $27,000 that's on your credit can be a strong deterrent. So, but there is a rule that does allow the inspectors, actually tells the inspectors that they should report.
So we, just to add a couple of comments from the public perspective. If I just Google TREC right now, TREC, it comes up with a list of information about, watch out for rental fraud scams. I mean, communication, can that be updated to say, hey, these people were just in violation of X, and it's the top story on the site?
That might be more of a summary.
So, yeah, Summer's here and I know she's listening in, so I think I'll let you speak, but I think, communications, education, avenues that we could look into.
I mean, if that was on there, I would, that's the first place I went to just go look, see what's up there, right? Boom, if that pops up number one, I'd read that right away and go, hey, I should watch out for these folks.
And those topics rotate pretty continuously. They change it up. So, yeah.
Yeah, except to say from an air conditioning license holder perspective, I believe that list is on the air conditioning licensing website when they're bought. And then this is an issue with people doing air conditioning and they attach to the ancillary services. You can't buy refrigerant without a license. You can't scrap junk without a license. So maybe you attach it to something. You can't close the house deal without the license report attached to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm going to add on to that too, because I think there's maybe some things we can learn from other agencies about how they report these violations or how they flag them for the general public to understand.
I think certainly communication would be a good thing. I think if we go specifics, I'd say we stick with agents and inspectors because that's who we're responsible for. But it wouldn't hurt to say, hey, there are other entities for plumbers, electricians, HVAC, and here's their names where you can check, see if those are licensed too. But I think kind of keep our conversations specific to our entity. Stay in our lane type of thing.
And I really open that can of worms for company licensing, but I'm used to a company license and apprentices or work under the company license.
Yeah.
And that top license holder is responsible for all their actions and all the outcomes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I hate to say that, but for the real estate agent side, they don't always know what industries are licensed, what does require a license, like lead paint inspections. All the time I see that one of people that don't realize that is a license. Mold, I think they pretty much know. Termite, they pretty much know, but there are some other things, asbestos, lead, that should be presented as, hey, these things actually require a license. So just something to think about.
I've added this to the official, unofficial, legal 1 and 2.
And I'll just add, Lee, that Teresa has just joined the meeting.
Oh, hey, Teresa.
She's muted, but
Okay.
she's there.
She's there.
Hi, I'm here. Hello.
Welcome. All right. So that was a bit. I'm sure you know. All right. Before we move it, any other questions for the enforcement division? Make sure. Okay. Education and examinations division, please.
Hello, welcome, Cole. I am Jennifer Wheeler, Director of Education and Exams for TREIC. And just to piggyback on this conversation, I'll mention that we are in the process of discussing updates to the legal ethics SOP course. that's going to be, we're going to take that in another agenda item later in the meeting. But perhaps, especially like Tony referenced 220, that might be something of value to consider putting in the new manual. And I just wanted to remind everybody, I know we're well into the meeting now, but if you are seeking CE credit for attending this meeting, there's a sign up sheet. You need to sign in and sign out. Do we have two?
No.
Or is that the one that was by the door?
They're
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the sign up sheet, and just remember you have to stay for the whole meeting. You can't get more than 4 hours of CE credit for one license renewal term, but it is there for you if that's something you want to do. I'll move on to the reports. The education reports included in your materials begin on page 12. I'm not going to go line by line, but I wanted to just kind of let you know, generally speaking, we have one kind of newish inspector pre-licensing education provider. They're in the process of getting their courses approved, but that brings us up now to a total of 12 pre-licensing education providers, which I think is pretty significant because for a number of years we had 7, and it was 7. So, that's kind of encouraging. On a similar note, my team is gearing up for a super busy year, as many of the pre-licensing courses that were approved in accordance with the content changes that we went through are up for renewal. I can't believe we're saying this, but they've already been around for almost 4 years. So a big chunk of those will expire in 2025. We've already started seeing some of those applications trickle in. Some have already gotten them approved. We've got some 2029 expiration dates already, but I think the bulk of them we're going to probably start seeing in March, April, May. Just so you know, we're ready for that, anticipating that. You asked me this is not an agenda item, but it is a bit of a just education update. One of the things that this committee and the education subcommittee had talked about was, what can we do to facilitate getting ICC courses approved for continuing education credit? And so I spent some time, it took me a little while to dig deep enough to find an appropriate contact, somebody who could actually answer the question and give me some answers. I have basically been playing phone tag with her. More recently, I have left 2 messages and I haven't heard back. I'm going to keep this on my radar and I'm going to keep pursuing it. And then I'll include it as part of my report, the update as a part of my report for the next inspector committee as well. But I'm not going to let it go until I get to actually have a conversation with somebody. And that is the conclusion of my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Jennifer? All right, thank you. Licensing division.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Denise Sample, Director of Licensing. I'm gonna stand up, but I'm hoping my keyboard doesn't just fall right off. So as to touch on what Chelsea was saying earlier, the licensing division is responsible for making sure we don't issue out a license. It's got her signature and the agency seal unless that applicant has met all of the minimum requirements. And so this is for all the licenses issued by TREIC. So what we've got here are regular monthly staff reports, and this is data through November. So if you look on that first report, it's initial applications received, and that bottom left corner shows the inspector applications by type, and that's a comparison of last fiscal year to this fiscal year. The next page are 2 other TREIC application types that are not inspectors. So if you move on to the 3rd page of my reports, page 20 of your materials, on the right-hand side is the inspector renewal counts, and then the renewal rate at the bottom for each inspector license type. The next page is license and registration counts. The total number of inspectors with the active inspectors broken out is kind of towards the middle of, or the lower part of that table. And so as of at the end of November, we had 3,756 active inspectors and 4,510 total. So the next page kind of shows a graphical trend of all the inspectors combined, and that's that yellow bar graph. And then the last report is the application processing time. This is just for the benefit of our new committee member. This is the average number of days that it takes the licensing team to respond to an applicant's submission of documents for an application. So a lot of times we can go back and forth multiple times on the same application. That time that we're waiting for the applicant to send us additional information is not counted, nor is the time it takes the applicant to pass the exam or provide fingerprint background documentation. So we are right at the end of November at about 9.5 days for a professional inspector application and around 5 days for a real estate inspector application. And that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Denise? Nope. All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Item number 11, probably didn't want to sit down, but item number 11, staff update regarding comparison of examination, license, and education provider data for the time periods of March 2019 through February 2021, November 2022 through October 2021.
My name's Rebecca Bennett, and I work with Jennifer Wheeler in the Education and Examinations Division. And Jen and Denise and I are going to tag team a little bit to give you some information. But I'm going to start off. I was asked to present some exam pass rate data so you all could examine changes to how the inspector pre-licensing education requirements may or may not have affected the exam pass rates. So I'm going to do three things. First, I'm going to give you a reminder of what changed with the inspector education requirements. Second, I'm going to give you some definitions so you know what I mean by the term pass rate and how I define the before and after groups for this particular comparison. And finally, I'm going to highlight three trends that you can see in the exam pass rate data. So first, just a reminder of what changed. At a high level, basically what changed with the inspector pre-licensing courses, they were streamlined to eliminate redundancies and repetitive requirements. And Jennifer Wheeler's here to provide more details if you have questions about the specific courses. The second change that we're going to be examining is the change to the exam scheduling options that inspector applicants have. So as you know, there are two exams that inspectors are required to pass to get their license. There's the state portion of the exam and the national portion of the exam. We used to require applicants to take both portions of the exam on the same date, back to back. Starting in April 2021, we gave candidates the option where if they wanted to, they could go take just one portion of the exam and then go home and rest and study for the other portion and take the other portion on a later date. So those are the two changes we are examining. Are there any questions about that? Second, just to give you a couple of definitions so you know what I mean by the term exam pass rate and how I define the before and after comparison groups for this particular comparison. We are looking at first attempt exam pass rates, which is exactly what it sounds like. To get the first attempt exam pass rate, you look at an inspector's grade on their first attempt at the national exam and their grade on their first attempt at the state exam, and you combine those. So if they passed both of those on the first attempt, they're counted as a pass in the exam pass rates. If they passed just one of those exams, but failed the other one, they're counted as a fail in the exam pass rates. And then obviously if they failed both, they're counted as a fail. So that's what we mean by first attempt exam pass rates. For the before and after samples, we wanted to give you a full 2 years worth of data for each group. And we wanted to get you as recent a group of data as we had available. So for the after group, you can see at the bottom, we have 2 years worth of data from November 1st, 2022 through October 31st, 2024. So very recent data. And all of the candidates in that group took the new courses under the new scheduling options. For the before group, we had to go back to March 1st, 2019 through February 28th, 2021 to find another 2-year sample where all of the candidates in that group took the old courses under the old scheduling requirements. So we have two comparable groups with 2 years worth of data. So that's what we're looking at for the before and after samples.
And the N equals is the actual number of people that were counted.
Exactly. Okay. And Denise will talk about some of the changes you can see in the trends about how many applicants have applied, because you can see that the N changes over time. Yeah. In the before group, there's more people that applied. In the after group, there are fewer. And then the trend that you're very well aware of, far fewer people apply for the real estate inspector license. So then there were just three trends that I wanted to highlight for you in the data. I'm not sure I can do it with the mouse, so I will just point. If you look at the combined exam pass rate in the before group, you can see there's almost no change between the before and after candidates. There's a slight decrease. And the same with the real estate inspectors, almost no change in the exam pass rates. This could be interpreted to mean that the streamlined changes to the inspector pre-licensing courses did not have much of an impact on the exam pass rates. In fact, streamlining the courses to remove the redundancies did not have a significant negative impact, but it also did not improve the exam pass rates. So if that was a goal, we have not achieved that goal. Now, there's nothing wrong with these particular exam pass rates. They're not extremely low. But if you were hoping to improve them, that's not been achieved. The second trend I wanted to point out is if you drill down and look separately at the national exam pass rates and the state exam pass rates, you're going to see a trend that's been there historically in the past and continues into the present. And that is that the state exam pass rates are much higher than the national. So one, on my place, I apologize. This could indicate that the inspector pre-licensing courses do a better job of preparing candidates to pass the state portion of the licensing exam than they do at preparing them to pass the national portion of the licensing exam. So if you were interested in taking additional action, not that I'm suggesting you should, but if you were, these data suggest that the best place to focus your attention is to look at how the pre-licensing courses are preparing candidates specifically for the national portion of the exam. Finally, the third trend I wanted to point out for you is if you look at the after schedule and compare the pass rates for the candidates who have taken advantage of this new scheduling option, where they can take the two exams on different dates, you'll see that those candidates did slightly better, 62.8%, than the candidates who took both exams on the same date. So it's a slight increase, which appears to help candidates. So those are the three trends I just wanted to highlight for you. Not much change in the before and after groups, with a slight decrease in the after group. When you look at the separate national and state pass rates, the state exam pass rates are much higher. And when you look at this new scheduling option, the pass rates are slightly higher for the candidates who have opted to take advantage of this new scheduling option. I'm happy to answer any questions, or I can pass it on to either Jennifer to talk about courses.
I'll just add a couple of other things, and of course you can ask Rebecca questions. But I would suggest some things to consider in this are one, and I hadn't thought about this until recently. One, that within the last 2 years, or of this particular 2 years, it's the first time for educators to teach the new education. So there may be some learning curve there with them shifting to, to a significantly different content. And I guess I'm only saying that to say that this is the first 2 years of data. So I don't think that you could say, well, it didn't work. I think you need more and longer before you can come to that conclusion. And the other thing was, well, one, I think there is some significance to the increase in those who are taking the national and state separately versus together. Like that, I think that is.
I think having that
says
for
something.
people to have as an option, obviously, is something that's being taken advantage of. So I think that's an indication that that was the right choice,
Right.
to be able to do that. So I think that was good. The before and after pass rates, I mean, right at about 60%. I mean, I remember it was much lower
Yeah.
years ago. The number of people taking it, I think, is also skewed because there were a lot of people rushing to get it in because they knew the new coursework was coming, the new pre-licensure courses were coming.
You're exactly
So I
right.
think quantity-wise, it's a little different there.
Well, that was also COVID. And so we
Yes.
had it like kind of two factors. We had people rushing into the industry and also wanting to finish the old courses or
And I think the prep courses had been established for so long on the old licensure that now they had to completely redo the test prep courses
Mhm.
for a lot of those. And there's a learning curve with that too. As far as the state and the national portion, I would love to see us, I'd love to see the national portion higher, but I know that Pearson VUE has us, we're able to go in and really dig deep in all of the questions that they ask on the state.
That's
We
right.
don't have that option on the national. So if we see, and for those of you who don't know, Pearson VUE is the one who does our testing and everything else. Well, they ask for our input, and there's, a 1 or 2 day meeting where we sit with Pearson VUE and go over every question. They go over the metrics of every question, how many answered it right, how many answered it wrong, which ones are test questions, to determine is this question just too hard or is it way too easy? Do we need to move that off? So we really get in depth on the state side, and I think that gets fine tuned every year.
Mhm.
If we had an option to do the national, then we might, if in looking at those questions and those metrics, we might be able to make adjustments on the education side, maybe modify a class or whatnot to better accommodate. I just don't know if we have that ability to do that.
So to answer that question, the answer is no, we don't. We adopt the National Home Inspector exam that's developed by the EBPHI, Examination Board of Professional Home Inspectors. But they do that. I'm not sure. I think it's 4 or 5 years. Did they do that? Because they just did it recently. They did make some changes. And so if there's anything, an outcome out of this that you would want to suggest, I think it would be for the subcommittee to look at those changes that they made to the most recent content outline. They have included some topics such as, the electric vehicle charging stations and life safety features.
Yeah.
And some other things. And maybe from a national level, there's something that the committee could look at and make some suggestions to the new course outlines, or see if there are any readily identifiable gaps.
Well, it's
that
tough.
are
I mean,
missing.
every license holder here remembers taking the national and having to study about fuel oil and stuff that you will never see in Texas. It's just,
Right.
But the difference between the two tests is the state portion is pick the right answer, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the national portion is pick the best answer.
Well,
Oh, it's very different. So, I mean, that is.
So is it a question then of the study material for the national? That's a big discrepancy between state and national in terms of what you're studying or why that pass rate is so
If there's a lot of stuff on the national exam that we don't.
It just
need to
doesn't
know
apply
in
here.
depth.
I think I've seen 2 boilers in
Just
Texas.
Yeah.
Got it.
They're more
In commercial.
with that state.
I mean, just as a reminder, we did utilize the national exam content outline when developing the national portion of the courses. So they weren't, it was a substantial tool in the work that was done by this committee and the subcommittee.
But Mike, with the subcommittee, if you guys can take a look at the changes they made the last time and just revisit whether that's still applies and the guidelines for those pre-licensures are still in line with the changes that were made.
Yeah.
Now, I will remind you too, and I'm sorry to cut you off. The education providers are also responsible for updating material when anything is updated. So,
The next part of my question is, you used to show exam pass rates by school. We don't see that anymore. Yeah, and I'm just curious on this. The newer, because you said you had a whole bunch of new providers. Are their pass rates different than the legacy?
we do publish those. We're
Okay.
required by statute to
Yeah, I
publish
just not
those.
seeing it. in-
Okay.
Yeah,
They're on our website.
okay. Yeah.
Yes.
I
Right.
just, if there's any trends like, hey, the new guy, I hate to say it, the new guys, the new ones that have developed their whole programs under this, the new guidelines, are they doing better or worse?
Well, that's an interesting question. So like those who had never developed material before, so their first material is the new material, as opposed to those who had to shift.
Yeah, just a curiosity, maybe too far in the weeds, but
It's available publicly on our website. If you can recognize the new names and actually go look and see what their pass rates are, if you're curious. It also takes a few years for them to get enough students that have completed the courses and then go take the exams to show up in the pass rates. So they may just have a very small number on there. But there's a link directly on our website under education that you can go look at all of those.
Yeah, it may take a few years for the data to actually mean something. is what you're
Right.
saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Shannon Gatewood once again. I think another thing to think of is that doesn't bother me at all looking at that because the state is much more concentrated. And I'm glad to see it's a higher pass rate because it's concentrated to the SOP and what they actually need to know for a Texas licensed inspector.
Yeah.
So the NHIE is so broad, as has already been brought up about boilers, fuel oil, things that we'll never have to worry about here. It is what it is on that aspect. I look forward to seeing what the subcommittee's take on it is when they get done with it, but I don't think it'll be anything.
Yeah. And then you guys send a supplement to that regarding the licenses. Those numbers are interesting, and part of, I think those numbers also, the applications received and the licenses issued, is people trying to get in before and after. But what I did notice is that the gap between applications received and license issued are substantially different before that time and on the after time. That's a big gap change in that one. So there was 1,400 applications received before and just under 600 licenses issued. After, it was just over 1,000 and almost 700 received. It's much higher.
And that's Denise's wheelhouse.
It came as just that other tab, the inspector supplemental materials.
Yep.
I will say that, with licensing, the thing to remember is processing the application also became easier and submitting an application became easier with the streamlining of the education requirements. If you recall prior, it was any number of combination certificates. And if the applicants had already completed a 200-hour course block from a provider, they would supplement with additional courses. And a lot of times we were trying to, fit old requirements, even older ones, into what the current ones were at the time. So it was a lot harder of an application to process. I don't have any other theories or ideas on why that trend is what it is, but I do know that the application process for the applicant and for my team processing became it was a much more streamlined process with the new requirements in place.
I also think there's a component there that there was so much being advertised about that those pre-licensure courses changing. Some people, I better get my application and get that ready to start, and then they just never finished. That felt that rush to get in before. So I just thought that's a big gap change on the before and after. I was like, ooh. All right. Anybody else have any questions on that agenda item? All right, moving on. Item number 12, discussion possible action regarding proctoring and identification requirements in 22 TAC.
I'll take this. Paul, these are the rules we brought to you back in October. These are education-related rules. They had gone to ESAC as well, the Education Standards Advisory Committee. ESAC recommended these changes, voted to propose these specific changes. We brought it to you all because they impact or touch on inspector education as well. As we wanted to get your take on these before we move forward. You all recommended them for proposal as well. So fast forward, we get to November, they're proposed, we get comments. ESAC met again in January and they looked at the comments and they had a good discussion about these proposed changes. And they actually recommended an additional change to remove the closed book requirements from the rule. So what staff will now need to do, staff is working on those changes. We will present those back to ESAC at their April meeting. So we wanted to bring this forward to you again, for two reasons really. One, to see if you had any additional changes based on the comments received, I think there's just one here included in the materials. But then also just to let you know, why this isn't going forward in February to the commission as a recommendation for adoption from stack. So really, unless you have recommendations or any changes, kind of just an update for now. But you'll see this again in April.
Because it's considered more than a non-substantive change.
Yeah, it's more than a non-substantive change, and so we're limited in what we can do kind of from the period of proposal to adoption.
All right, anybody have any questions on that? Nope. Item number 13, discussion possible action regarding recommendations related to the standard of practice. This is a standing item from SOP subcommittee. So did the SOP subcommittee have anything that they wanted to report?
No, we went through all the general provisions in meeting 1, meeting 2, we went through the structural, and then I'm going to need to see the notes now that I'm going to chair that committee for the last 2 meetings. Obviously, I didn't take any notes.
Me neither. No, we'll get you some. I think we all kind of need probably a refresher of where we were and where we're.
I know we had a at-length conversation about roof inspections, walking on the roof, or using drones and other type of mechanisms.
Yeah.
And, that was probably the bulk of our conversation.
You can probably still contact Brian and, and
oh yeah,
probably got plenty of information. He'll be more than happy.
I was gonna say, I think Randy, didn't you run the last meeting?
No, the one before
One
that.
before, okay. Yeah.
That was just general provisions on the first
We'll
one.
do like when we meet, we can do like a circle up recap of where we've been and where we're headed. Don't worry.
And now we have the new thing that we need to discuss with regard to zip levels and the foundation.
Correct.
So we'll have to
I've got notes.
we'll have to go back to that, I think.
To that section.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, item 14, discussion possible action regarding requirements for an apprentice inspector to obtain a real estate inspector license and for a real estate inspector to obtain professional real estate inspector license. So the materials have been included in there. I wanted to bring this up because it's been a long time since we've actually looked at this. And since we started talking about the apprentice class and stuff like that, I just want to make sure I'm not necessarily recommending a change. I just want to have us all go through this and just Abby, if you want, or actually maybe licensing, if you guys want to just give the Reader's Digest version of going from one to another, I just wanted to make sure everybody's on the same page and we're clear.
Yeah, I can do super high level. We included both the statute and relevant rule in your materials. So as you all know, there's essentially 2 paths. There's sort of the experience path and there's the substitute education path. So 1102.108 and 109 for real estate inspector license and professional inspector license. That's sort of your traditional experience route, what's required by statute to obtain either of those licenses. And then by statute, you also have, I think it's 111, that lays out the substitute path, the education path. So cut to the rules, because of course we get all of our authority from the statute. So the rules are very similar. We have 535.214, which outlines both of those paths as well. And so you've got an A here, the real estate inspector license path, the professional inspector license path in subsection B. And then kind of later on, it gets into the substitute path where, it lays out the requirements for, education to differentiate a little bit from that traditional or experience path.
No, perfect. Like I said, I want to make sure give everybody an opportunity because we haven't looked at this in a really long time. But just want to make sure that if anybody had any questions or any suggestions, or if they have experience or know somebody who's gone through that experience of upgrading the license or changing classification of the license, if they run into any problems that we might need to address. Okay. Hearing none. Better. Item 15, discussion of possible action regarding potential items to be addressed in the Inspector of Legal and Ethics and SOP review. And I'm going to talk about this. Just for some background, we used to, for the 8-hour required continuing education course, used to just be an outline that the educators would have to kind of come up with their own course material. And then this will be segment 3, right? Of the third version of, we actually come up with the content and TREIC puts it together, and staff spends a lot of time putting all this together. The first course was good. I think it was a really good base. I think this last course was a really much better version of it, much more in depth. I've taught it a couple times. I've gotten a lot of really good feedback from it, that there was just much more usable content that people actually wanted. So I think that's good. I haven't talked to anybody who's taken the online version, but I would have to assume that's the same. So with that, I'll let you delve into it.
Sure. Yeah, it's that time of every other year again. The new version will be required to be effective on September 1st. So we typically take the revised version. We're going to review and revise the content of the current legal ethics SOP course. We lovingly refer to it as LESOP. Let's see how that rolls off your tongue.
I apologize for let me ask you real quick. The legal 1 and 2 on the broker side, doesn't that start January 1st, not September 1st?
Yeah, legal update is January 1,
So
but your course is September.
Why are they different dates?
They've historically been that way. We also alter like broker responsibility from legal updates so that we're not working on the same things at the same time. We just try to stagger them a little bit.
Fair enough.
For your sanity.
For our sanity.
I'm okay with it.
A little bit, yeah. I guess, yeah, I mean, usually things are effective in September or January. That's just like a real common thing. So at the onset of these courses, that may have been why inspectors landed in September. So we'll take the materials once they're finished to the May commission meeting for the full commission. Prior to that, they'll be presented to this committee at your spring meeting, April. But basically myself, Jennifer Gruby, our curriculum developer, Vanessa, Abby, Kat, will all have eyes on it. I was just thinking as this meeting was happening, so in this meeting, if there's anything that any of you have like high on your radar that you think is something that is really valuable that may need to be included in the next version of the course, bring that forward to us. If you think of it later, you can email me or general counsel. But we'll probably consult some, if this is your direction, with the education subcommittee, see what topics they have. And then as you were discussing the SOP next meeting, I thought it might be helpful to to sit in on that and see if there's anything, because we don't reinvent the wheel when we're revising this course, but we do we address these standards in this 2-year version, and then we'll kind of replace that with some of the other standards. Hot topics is always a big one. And again, there are a lot more components, optional systems, I think, that are becoming part of inspection that haven't been in the past. And so I think that's probably a good, something good to consider. But really, this is just an agenda item for your input and for you, chair or committee members, if you have a specific direction that you want us to go.
Hot topics are, another topic, just what we're talking about, thermal imaging, dip levels. It might not be a bad idea to throw that in the inspector education side as well, to make sure that if you're going to provide this, there's got to be a standard of competency and knowledge.
And what requires licenses.
Yes. Yeah. So anybody else have any suggestions for Jennifer? It's just topics. They're going to dive right in.
I think we kind of skipped over part of this in the letters, was also the extra services from Mr. Gruhl's letter. We kind of jumped over that.
It's hard for us to regulate extra services. We can regulate the advertising and hold people accountable for the advertising. The extra service is a little harder one from what I've seen, because that one's harder. It's in the rule already that
thou shalt not, yeah.
Right. But you can't get paid for something unless in there, but a lot of guys kind of slide that in their inspection agreement to get around that rule. I think it's worth looking at because I think it's an issue. Absolutely. But SOP, you can kind of look at that portion of it too, as far as the paying referral fees and that type of stuff. I think if we can find a way to clarify that more rather than allowing it to be just in an inspection agreement, because I don't think the client necessarily sees that or understands that.
I'm also talking about the, yeah, we did our inspection and oh, by the way, our sister HVAC company can do the repair part.
Yeah.
That's the really big issue that's coming.
So, yep, I'll put that on your list. No, it's a good point. You're right. That was in there. I just didn't mention. No, it needs to be addressed. It's a common thing, especially with these big firms. Oh, our sister company does roofing.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else, Jennifer?
No, that's it. I'll just communicate with you.
Okay.
And we'll go from there.
Cool. And if anybody has any items suggest, please feel free to send it to Jennifer or anybody on the committee, and we can get that over to her as well. All right. Request for future meeting agenda items. I think we put a few on there already, so that's good. Does anybody have any agenda items they would like to see on the next meeting? Okay. Hearing no additionals. We will look at discussion and possible action regarding future meeting dates. Monday, April 21st. I can do that.
That's Easter Monday.
You're not going to be on vacation.
Anybody the day before. So, yeah, it is Easter Monday, day after. Anybody have a conflict with Monday, April 21st?
Is the state office open for San Jacinto Day? Because that is San Jacinto Day.
That's a skeleton.
Day.
So we're open.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is everybody okay with April 21st? Go from there. All right. Do we want to look at July also? Oh, I'm in the wrong month. July looks 14th, Monday. Anybody have any conflict with that? Everybody okay?
Wait,
All right,
July 14?
Yeah.
July 14th, second Monday.
Good.
And it's a ways away, and we don't have to make a decision on now, but the other proposed date is October 20th. So if there's anybody has a hard conflict with that, we can certainly look at that, but we can also talk about it the next meeting also. So, all right, so we'll set the next one for Monday, April 21st. I think July 14th is going to work, but if we run into problems, we'll talk about that at the next meeting also, if that's an issue. We'll look at Monday, April 21st being our next meeting at 10 a.m. here. Anybody have anything else?
May just want to go ahead and mark the 20th.
And I think our staff may send you a calendar invite that you can accept as well.
Yeah, we just do that so that, that is a time period where things get really busy and Lee's right. I mean, they're always up for discussion, but marking your calendar tends to help.
Keep you from scheduling other things?
Uh-huh.
All right, so I need to make sure I go toward it. Sorry. Quick. Oops. Yeah, not 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, you'd be up here by yourself.
I wouldn't be up here by myself.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be in this room, actually.
Yeah. All right. With that, we will adjourn the meeting at 11:52. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank everybody online for joining us as well. Have a great day and drive safe.
Thank you.